Hi everyone, welcome back to the podcast, and I'm so excited to be here today together with Marguerite Rigoglioso. She's the founding director of Seven Sisters Mystery School and a scholar practitioner of the ancient Mediterranean mystery tradition. She's the author of The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece and Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity. And she's the foremost authority on the history of virgin birth and the author of the bold new book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, Mary and the Lineage of Virgin Births. She has taught many graduate and undergraduate courses in the US and the UK, and in 2012 founded her own Seven Sisters Mystery School, through which she has been teaching about the sacred feminine and mentoring clients on the evolutionary spiritual path. She's also the author of Virgin Mother Goddesses of Antiquity and the Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece. Marguerite, I'm so happy and excited to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Shireen.
I'm just so amazed by your work. As I told you before, I've been listening to all the talks that you've done and all the interviews that you've done, and I feel like something is really awakening in me when I listen to you. So I would love for you for those that might have not heard your other talks on any other show, if you want to just tell us a little bit about your path and journey to where you are right now.
Right. Yes. So it's been a long road, a decades long road. And, some highlights along the way include having had an awakening to the goddess back when I was in my 30s, through studies that I was doing, and then trips to ancient Greece, and a women's spirituality program that I participated in the Boston area. Then I went to the California Institute of Integral Studies and got my master's and PhD, basically in women's spirituality. And that has led to me teaching, me writing the 3 books that you mentioned, and eventually me founding Seven Sisters Mystery School, as you said, and bringing us up to the present time, where a lot of the focus of my work is on bringing forth Mother Mary as a mentor, a master who became a goddess, and so forth. And then most recently, I'm talking about and teaching about Guinevere and Arthur and sort of the hidden history. And I have an upcoming class on June 15, 2022, for anybody who's listening. And of course, that will be in replay indefinitely. So those are just a few of the little highlights, because otherwise we would definitely be here for hours.
Yeah, when I listen to different talks with you, I pick up some of the pieces here and there. There's such a long journey with this, and you've talked about like all the academic work that you've done and all of that part, and then your journeys and also just working with everything from channeling to like really studying something. And to me, I feel that your work right now is so important because you are bringing forward our Divine Mother, which is like everything. To me, that is the source of everything and of all of creation. And I think for many of us who work with this type of work have seen that in one or another way in our visions, or she shows that to us, that it is the one that births everything. And I think that it's really interesting because your path went from, I'm also very interested in so you have the Seven Sisters Mystery School, the name of that, and then also the connection with the oracles of Greece and the priestesses. how did that whole thing like lead in for you into the work that you're now sharing with Mother Mary and Miraculous Conception?
Yes. Back in 2012, when I founded the school, I was in the shower trying to figure out what would be the name of it. And I went through various iterations. And eventually it just hit me, Seven Sisters Mystery School. Because Seven Sisters references the Pleiades as the seven starry mothers of the Pleiades constellation, if you will, or asterism. And I knew from my research into divine birth that they were considered by the ancient Greeks and many people around the world as seven starseed mothers of humanity, that their DNA has in large part gone into our DNA, and that there's a long history between the Pleiades and Earth and humans and so forth, and that history has gone through many different iterations, positive and negative, but that those seven sisters were considered not only starseed mothers, but virgin mothers of humanity. They were considered, sovereign in and of themselves. And it was through a series of sort of forced interactions, in a way, that they united with certain beings on the other side of the veil and gave birth to lineages. Okay. But they are associated with virgin birth. They are also associated with oracles on planet Earth, in particular the Oracle of Dodona, where the priestesses there were called Pleiades, meaning doves, meaning Pleiades. The word Pleiades and Pleiades and doves are identical because there's a story in ancient Greece that these star sister beings were also considered doves, or they became doves at a certain point. So this is telling us that the Oracle of Dodona, for example, was a place where the priestesses were channeling information from the Pleiades. And then, of course, there's the more famous Oracle of Delphi, which has a kind of a different lineage in terms of who the priestesses were channeling. But also what I find is at Dodona and Delphi, the names of the priestesses and their children were all divine birth stories. These were miraculous conceptions by them having sort of an astral sexual encounter with various males, which is along the trajectory of divine birth from like pure parthenogenesis or virgin birth like Mother Mary without any male actor at all the way to, tantra of a king and a queen. So there's a whole series of things that, and an evolution of that practice that I talk about in all of my books. So that also, again, ties in Mother Mary, because when I started researching divine birth and understanding all the many connections in antiquity in the Western Mediterranean, in the Mediterranean world, but throughout the world, I began to understand that the scope and the importance of the divine birth function as a practice that high holy women would use to bring specific avatars to the planet to help humanity. And therefore, by looking at that material in ancient Greece, I was able to understand Mother Mary a lot more comprehensively and get a real picture of what she was up to. And that's what I offer to the world in my latest book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception. And then moving forward to King Arthur and Guinevere, while I was researching virgin birth, I came upon their stories. And in reading them, I realized there are several divine conception and divine birth stories there. And so I'm bringing that into the picture now with my latest work and my class.
That is really, really interesting. So did that happen on like an intellectually scholar level, that you started reading and seeing connections, or was it also coming to you on a different level, like in your consciousness with King Arthur? And I would love to learn more about this these stories and the energy behind it as well, if you want to share.
Yeah, I mean, so the question was, did it come intellectually or intuitionally? So for the first time I really understood virgin birth was in 2001. I was standing in my brother's apartment and I had just read a book in Italian called Meteres, Mothers, by Anna Maria Corradini. And she was talking about the Demeter and Persephone relationship, the mother-daughter goddesses, and how basically Persephone was born parthenogenetically from Demeter. In other words, in a virgin fashion. This is a story older than Zeus coming and raping Demeter and so forth. And the way she was talking about this and kind of matriarchy and all of that, I just had this intuitional flash that was almost like when I had used sacred medicines. It was that strong. And I just went tilt and I just thought, oh my gosh, virgin birth is something that's real. So when I started investigating priestesses of ancient Greece, with the idea that I was going to write a major work on all of the mentions of ancient priestesses and really study what they were about and so forth, I had that hypothesis in my mind, and I started finding a tremendous amount of information to back it up, that virgin birth was real, and who the priestesses were that were involved in this, where they resided in historical texts, where they resided in what they call legend, which I think are a form of history, where they reside in myth, which I also think are a form of history. So it began as an intellectual exercise, but along the way, I had a few ceremonies using sacred medicines where I got other levels of downloads. More than that, though, was my intuition while I was writing. I would be typing or I would be reading, and I would get more and more downpours, things that I would intuit, and then I would have to go and find evidence for it in the literature. So it was really like a figure eight kind of process where I was using intellect and intuition. So I'll pause there and see what you'd like to look at next.
Yeah. And was that also the case with Arthur and Guinevere in the same way?
So with Arthur and Guinevere, I had always been somewhat aware of their story, and it always resonated with me because it's in Western culture, right? At some point, and I think, I'm not sure if it was while I was doing the research on virgin birth or after I published my first book, The Cult of Divine Birth in Ancient Greece, but I came upon written material. And I think one of the major ones was Sara Perini in Italy. She has a book on queens and priestesses of the Avalonian age or something like that. It might have been her book, or it might have been a few other things that I started looking into and reading. And that's when I realized, when I started looking into their stories, I so clearly was able to understand how King Arthur was conceived. You know, for example, one of the things that I learned in my work with ancient Greece is that whenever you have a story that says, oh, this woman conceived this person and this person on the same night, or this woman had sex with her husband in the likeness of a god, or you're dealing with the territory of divine birth. So in King Arthur's situation, what you have is his mother Igraine had sex one night, not with her husband. It was with Uther Pendragon. And this was through a magical spell that Merlin had done to make Uther Pendragon look like her husband, you see. So once I read that, I was like, oh my God, this is a divine conception rite. This is all the shards that we have of the story. but there's far more underneath that. And when I started looking at some of the stories of the other characters and the other women, it was a whole piece of information that came through that is going to be a major part of the course, because this is partly also what connects King Arthur with Jesus in that same lineage, basically. And it's what connects Guinevere with both Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene. So there's a lot more to it. I'm just giving little teases of what we're going to be talking about in that course, but it's giving you examples of how I'm able to extrapolate from the research I've done into it. And it's almost like, you know, when you develop yourself intuitively, which I have done, and I did go to psychic training school from, I would say 2009, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, you know, for several years, maybe 3 years at least. You cultivate an open state. And then I was also occasionally using sacred medicines to open my consciousness. So when you're doing that, and then you're also reading material, you see it in a much more expanded, intuitional way. So that's how I've been working for decades now, you know, a couple of decades.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just love the way so there's so many connections that you're making that is also new. Like this is like new things that you're bringing out, or maybe has been known, but not maybe like this big, right? Because
Yeah.
I was actually, so there's two interesting things. It must have been like a month or two ago, I was on the Hay House app and I saw this book about Anna, the grandmother of Jesus.
Yes.
It's the channeled one that you've been speaking about. And I actually started listening to this. So somehow it's all connected. We're like connecting together through these. I didn't even realize like that you would speak about that. And then in the book, and in your talks, you talk about, so what I love is that now we have moved into like even further forward in the timeline from when you speak. I'm just looking in the book. So you start to speak about the goddess that I'm working with, Inanna or Ishtar, and how I would love for you to explain. Maybe a lot of people are not aware of the connections moving forward in this line from goddess Inanna, and then all the way up, and now we're all the way up to Guinevere and King Arthur. It's so amazing. Can you share that as well?
Yeah. Well, what you start seeing with the goddess Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, meaning ancient Iraq, right? Ancient Mesopotamia. There were priestesses of Inanna who engaged in sacred marriage rites with priest kings. And there's not a lot of literature to look at, but there is some, and there's a really wonderful anthology called Sacred Marriage or Sacred Marriages. It's an anthology. I'm not recalling. I could go. It's right over there. The authors are right over there. But they have articles that look at some of this material, and then I developed this a bit in my book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous Conception, when I talk about Anne and I talk about their predecessor, Sarah, the biblical mother of Isaac, the biblical wife of Abraham in the Hebrew tradition. And by looking at that ancient material of priestesshoods of Inanna, the Naditu priestesses, the En priestesses, you know, these are some of the names of them, the titles that they were given. I'm able to understand them in the context of divine birth priestesshoods and what they were doing, and how Anne's predecessor, Sarah, going back at least to 3000 BC, perhaps, was probably an En or Naditu priestess. And I go through all the evidence that Savina Tubal has written in her book, Sarah the Priestess. I analyze that and I add my own information to it to show that I believe that Sarah was a divine birth priestess, and that the context was these En, Naditu, and Lukor priestesses, okay, all associated with Inanna through the ancient mythography and through the ancient imagery. So priestesses of Inanna seem to have been engaged in some kind of divine conception or divine birth or divine, let's say, sacred marriage ritual. Now, one thing that ends up happening is scholars will deny that this was ever about creating a child. Makes no sense at all why they would do that, but this is part of what academia does, to put veils over things. I mean, when I trace it back, sacred marriage rites were always intended for a divine conception of a divine child. So Inanna's priestesses, certain aspects or sectors of Inanna's priestesses were involved in this. And then this is a stream that you find throughout much of antiquity in the West. These divine birth processes, practices, encounters, and so forth. And so this brings us up to the present day, or not so much the present day, but at least, you know, the times of Arthur and Guinevere, which are roughly dated to around, you know, the 500s after Jesus, although we don't know. This could be a prehistoric story that predates Jesus, actually. But you start understanding material about what happened on their wedding night, Guinevere and Arthur's wedding night, in a whole different way. And that's something I won't go into in detail here, but we are going to go into it in the course, that is going to tie it into divine birth. And then that also brings us forward into the royal lineages of the British Isles and perhaps worldwide that continued on. And what were their rites? What were their practices? What were their conceptions all about? And was the process actually hijacked by negative forces so that these rituals of conception would take a negative turn, and therefore they would be bringing in a different type of child onto the earth plane that was no longer a Christed avatar?
Yeah. And
Okay,
as you have
a lot of dots here.
Exactly, because you have so many references, like from everything that you've read, and also the Gnostic texts, which I'm very interested in, and yeah, the old Sumerian stories, the stories from Mesopotamia, how all of this has evolved. And sometimes when we think about the world and our life, we're always like in this time frame somehow. We are so narrow when we're just looking in the now, but we have such a long history, and even so long that we cannot even like think about it. But we have so much old texts written, and everything is so clear, but no one wants to see the truth, and everyone is just like bound into this worldly way of living. And then things that are so miraculous and divine, just as conception, becomes very normalized and taken for granted. And we have forgotten so many, like you say, also rituals and practices. And we can see that where we are today is so much linked to what started happening maybe 5,000 years ago in our history. It's so clear that something shifted. So I think that's very interesting.
That is very interesting. Something did
Mm,
shift. And I have studied the work of Maria Gimbutas,
mm,
the Lithuanian archaeologist who looked at old Europe, and she sees those very marks that
mm,
about 5,000 years ago, you see a change in the iconography, and it goes from goddess venerating and female oriented and harmonious depictions to warring.
mm,
And it just seems that there was some kind of shift that happened on the planet.
mm. Yeah.
And a lot of other people come in then,
Mm,
oracles, and many oracles the world over have been talking about alternative histories of
mm,
what was really going on. And we have our people, our oracles, our writers, our uh, disclosure people who are really talking about much different histories than what we've been taught.
mm. Yeah. And exactly, because just because we have learned a certain type of history doesn't mean that it's correct, because
Yeah.
the history books are kind of like the news we're watching. It's not that accurate
No,
sometimes.
it's not accurate at all. In fact,
Yeah.
it's specifically injected with programming
Mm,
on the part of these negative forces that came in and
mm,
just figured out what institutions they needed to take over in order to get this different history promulgated and perpetuated
mm,
through the academic means.
mm. Yeah. And I think but it's so interesting that we still have like evidence of this, and when we do get into it, we see that there was a shift when um, some type of more enslavement
That's
happened, and it's so interesting how people can still, although the evidence is there, you still worship that energy, which is based on fear and not on like full divine wisdom that comes from within, and takes it's very interesting, because I'm also looking into being Kurdish myself, and I've seen that so in our culture there's a lot of spirituality naturally still in our language and everything. Something that you might love to know is that in Kurdish, so if a woman is pregnant, it's called that she's two-lifed, and that's how we say it, dugyan. When you're birthing, we don't have a word for birth like in Swedish and English. The birth is called to come from the mother, to come of the mother. So
wow.
if you say like happy birthday, it's like happy happy day of coming from the mother. So language also, like how has language evolved to hinder us to understand how like
That's
that. Yeah.
right. It locks us into certain concepts and it
Mm.
erases others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so interesting. And also when you look at these ancient stories, it's so clear that there has been, and also the depictions, if we just look at depictions from like when we look at Ishtar or in Egypt, like all of these, you can see that it's always like hybrids of different, like it looks like a person but with other types of traits, and
Yes.
so it's so visible that it might have also been, as ancient culture says, and also as tribes still say, that it's also beings from other worlds that
Yes.
have visited us. And it doesn't mean that they have stopped doing that. It's still
Yes.
going on, but in different ways, right?
Exactly. I mean, really good point. We have visual evidence right in front of our eyes for various
Mm,
things um, in so around the world in the archaeological record. And yet everyone just brushes it off in academia as, oh, a mythological quote depiction, as
mm,
though it's not real, as though it didn't have three-dimensional reality. And so this is again how the obfuscation continues, how things are hidden. And then when there are scholars and people who try to provide alternative views, they're laughed out of academia. So they have to go outside of academia, and they will find their audience. But, you know, academia is just a place by and large where the mystery, the magic, and the interdimensionality of things is taken out of the picture.
Yeah,
in favor of 5 senses kinds of excursions. Okay.
Yeah.
And 3-dimensional adherence to 3 dimensions.
That's the norm. We have created norms around so many things, and that's also a large part of the Western world is definitely under that. Yeah, that's how it still is, because it's also been like that for generations. Lost connections with nature, with themselves, and like a deep culture. And that has happened not because people are, it's like almost like people have had no choice. It's like a survival mechanism as well, because it's like an integrated fear to go against that.
Yes, and also because everybody is controlled through the money magic system, what Michael Tellinger calls the Babylonian money magic system.
Yeah.
Identifying precisely that portion of the world that you're talking about, because a lot was going on there. That was, some was positive and some was very, very negative. And so, you know, in some senses, we have to take a look at all of it now and say, what is actually being depicted here? And do we want to be with that goddess or that god, or, you know? So when everybody gets enslaved into a monetary system, then the pressure is on, and there's no time or energy to be open to anything except for making money so you can eat.
Survive.
When you take the land away from farmers, or make it so that they can't do the barter and exchange that they used to do to keep themselves alive, and, you know, it's really taken the power away from human people.
Yeah, definitely. And also recently, I was doing a internship for UN Women, and we had women, the indigenous women of the North, speak about the importance of the wisdom and knowledge that women hold in these indigenous cultures to preserve the nature, and that, like, when all the power has been given away or taken from women, it's really become very unhealthy, and we've forgotten. Maybe that's why also I'm thinking about something that you have spoke about when it comes to the mother, which came before everything. So we focused for a couple of years on different archetypes of a woman, and this doesn't mean that all women will be physical mothers. It's not that, but it's that we are all connected. Women are 100% connected back womb to womb, like it's womb to, like how far back we don't know, maybe from the universal womb, who just somehow created the physical womb. And I think that's so powerful, and you work with that system as well. I think that we see that how the imbalances outside of us have created so much imbalances within us. And I actually just graduated with a master's in sexual and reproductive health and rights, and that's also a really important topic when it comes to how healthcare has also disempowered women. We have also women going through different reproductive issues and disconnected. And you've done a lot of work around that. What do you think is important to work, because now you're also connecting us in this new program to the Christ Sophia and that whole wisdom. Like, how does all of this come together with the womb work? And
right. Well, one of the bodies of knowledge that I've studied and become certified to teach in is the Holy Womb Chakra system that a Hindu saint named Sri Kaleshwar kind of retrieved from the ancient manuscripts and brought into the modern day in the early 2000s. He crossed over and had his samadhi in 2012 at 36 years old. But prior to that, he consolidated these teachings about the Holy Womb Chakra. The Holy Womb Chakra being part of it, but also its own thing, separate from the second chakra, and also a universal chakra that that exists, you know, in the astral plane or in the universal sense of it, that belongs to what he called Mother Divine. And that, you know, Mother Divine is the supreme creative energy of the universe. And, you know, he talks about the relationship of the various universe origin stories that, you know, one is of Mother Divine, one is Shiva, one is, you know, but it all comes down to that really the mother womb is the center of everything. And in the ancient Gnostic material, you see that Sophia is considered the womb, you know, the womb goddess, the womb wisdom. I call her the womb wisdom of all creation. So she is a manifestation of this divine mother energy. And so a lot of the teachings that I've been sharing with others through the Holy Womb Chakra teachings that I offer is to help people get back in touch with their wombs through a system of mantras or sacred chants and yantras, sacred drawings. And through working this process of these sacred Sanskrit chants, you bring a vibration into your life and you're able to clear heartache. You're able to clear energies from previous partners. You're able to clear energies of unwanted touch, etc. And what he calls purify your womb so that it can be empowered, you know, connected again back up with Mother Divine, because it's basically a replica of Mother Divine, and that you can do magical things with it, like create sacred children, like do healings, like, you know, do other kinds of magical work and so forth. So this is an important part of what's been missing is, you know, the mystical attention to the womb, the energetic attention to the womb. We've just got the medical establishment that where it's all about, you know, the three-dimensional womb and what you do with it, what you don't do with it, childbirth, blah, blah, blah. But he's got a whole bunch of mantras that you can also use before, during, and after childbirth. And that lends a magical blessing and benefaction to the birth process, or the coming out of the mother process, as you would say, coming from the mother. And so these are pieces of what we all need to put together again. And the Sophia Christ consciousness is really, you know, the unification of the masculine, feminine, divine power that is described as, you know, Sophia feminine, Christ masculine. Those are just two terms that can be used. You can use Shiva Shakti, you know, whatever it is. But this particular, when we talk about Christ Sophia consciousness, we're also talking about the evolution of the human heart, you know, and the connecting really up of the whole entire template, or the original divine human template That's what we're aiming to awaken here. And so it's a pathway of love. It's a pathway of consciousness. And I do believe that the beings of the great time of Avalon were ultimately at the foundation, were connected with this, and that this is what we are needing to connect back up with again. So we are resurrecting these energies in their clear way for the now time, the critical now time, where so much negativity is going on, so much attempting to control humanity. We really all have to become very conscious now. And that's why I'm teaching about Guinevere and Arthur now, and how they connect with Mary, Jesus, and the Magdalene.
That's amazing. And when will the course start? This, yeah.
It begins live June 15th, 2022. And we have 4 live classes, 4 Wednesdays in a row. And it will be available in replay for anyone who can't see it live, and for anybody who's listening or watching after that window has been completed in July. It will remain on the Seven Sisters Mystery School site as an on-demand course. And you just go to 7, SEVEN, sisters, plural, mysteryschool.com. And you can always find it under the drop-down menu for online courses.
I will link to that in the show notes for everyone. And what else are you offering that is, I know, but you can tell the listeners.
Oh, I mean, my goodness. The other thing that we have going on live is the monthly Mother Mary Love and Empowerment Circle. And that's a very profound experience and process. The 3rd Thursday of every month, we join together on Zoom. And that has been going deeper and broader, where I bring in the energies of Mother Mary and do a transmission that is a journey or meditation or process with her that she's bringing us. Each month I do a different theme, and that's followed by some group sharing, and then an oracle by me in answer to other people's questions that's inspired by Mother Mary. So that's a wonderful thing for a very low subscription price. People are interested in that. You can also find that on the either online courses, or it's on the homepage now of Seven Sisters Mystery School. So those are the 2 live things right now. Of course, I offer private one-on-one sessions, and we have a bundled package of courses called Mastering Mary's Holy Womb Mysteries program. So that consolidates the Holy Womb Chakra teachings I was talking about, a deep course on the Mother Mary mystery teachings, and some other things on divine birth and the womb of creation. And then that has a live 3 times a year component that I offer, which is coming up in July, actually, end of July. That live call will be coming up with that package. And I will shortly be starting to offer a mentoring program along with that, so that people can really come in and integrate the material and be a little bit guided in a way that makes sense for them. So those are just some of the things. There are other things, but those are the headlines of what we're offering.
That's amazing. Everything sounds so wonderful, and we will have all the links in the show notes here if you're interested. Anyone who's listening, I can highly recommend Marguerite. She's so, I mean, you have a mix of everything when it comes to knowledge and wisdom, intuitive, but also you have the facts. And I love the book that I'm reading right now as well. And I'm looking forward to reading everything else that you've written, but Mary and these miraculous conception and the lineage of virgin births is so interesting, and I think it's really expanding our consciousness. So I really want to thank you for your work and your energy and everything that you're doing in the world. It's so important, and I'm really grateful that I connected with you.
Oh, yes, you're welcome. And thank you, Shireen, for yeah, this has been, several decades being woven together of my explorations on many dimensions, as well as my 10 years of directing Seven Sisters Mystery School. It's 10 years now, 2022.
Oh.
So yeah, there's a lot of threads that are now being woven together
Yeah,
in an
definitely.
ever more intriguing tapestry, shall we say.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you today and everyone who wants to check out Marguerite's website and all the programs. You have the links, and connect with us if you have any questions after this on Facebook or Instagram or email. And thank you so much, Marguerite, again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.